So, welcome to this episode of the Atrómitos Way. This is going to be Surviving the Shift, Building Resilient Fund Development Strategies. The AP News reported on May 1st, 2025, that food insecurity nationwide is the highest it's been in about a decade, making it potentially a really difficult time to start cutting food assistance through pantries. They went on to report the same day that food banks are struggling to meet rising demand from needy Americans as the federal government slashes funding for programs to feed the hungry. Advocates worry that cuts to food stamp programs still worsen the hunger crisis. And more recently, the federal government attempted to demand names, birth dates, personal addresses, and social security numbers of Americans who've accessed government funded food security programs, resulting in a lawsuit, surprise, surprise, by various food assistance recipients through the USDA, right? So USDA being the entity being sued, which was responsible for ordering the compliance with the program. So Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Programs, or referred to as SNAP, helps feed roughly 42 million Americans nationwide every year. And under the program, the federal government provides food and then states administer the program. And cuts to the program in tandem with rising costs threatens the food security of about 13% of the American population, including children and the elderly and disabled. So people who have not yet been in a position to fend for themselves in terms of acquiring food, and those who can no longer do so. So today on the Atrómitos Way, we'll spotlight how nonprofits are navigating a shifting funding landscape and explore the strategies being adopted to build more resilient, diverse funding models and what lessons have been learned along the way. And so joining us today, we have Sumner County Food Bank's Katie Garling. Katie, if you would introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm actually from the Sumner Community Food Bank.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's fine. There is a Sumner County, so people have literally called us for that before. So,
I wrote it right, and it says Sumner Community Food Bank, and I just said the wrong thing.
it's all
But
good.
thank you for
Yeah,
correcting.
no problem. Yes, hello. I'm Katie. I work at the Sumner Community Food Bank here in Washington, and we're technically a local food bank, but since the pandemic and since there's been a lot of changes, we've definitely reached out and kind of built a network of different organizations, schools, senior centers, other food banks, pantries, outreach programs in general. And now we have about 70 different programs across the Puget Sound, even, not even just South Puget Sound. And so, when we get donations of surplus food, especially from trucking or warehouse donors, we actually are able to take this abundance and send it out throughout the network to help people in everywhere in the area. So it's a really great program.
And what is your role at the Sumner Community Food Bank?
Yeah, I am the communications manager at the food bank. So that's, all the marketing, all the fundraising, all the grant writing, trying to fill the gaps that have been happening recently.
So what types of funding have historically supported the food bank?
Yeah, well, we're, really blessed to be in a very generous area. So a lot of individual and company donations. Since I joined in 2021, we've also been doing a lot of grant funding. So at this point, I think I'm at 1.3 million over the last few years to fund the organization and to kind of build our capacity. And we have some golf tournament, we have some fun events, just some general fundraising. So yeah.
Right. So what, with the recent changes in federal funding, has there been an impact for you as of yet, either in terms of actual funding or any direct funding that you might have had through the state or through the federal government, as well as ability to access, things like TFAP food?
Right. Well, as we started these changes this year, we didn't have any federal funding, so we did not lose any federal funding, which is a great thing. But as other organizations, other non-food organizations especially, have lost funding, the private and the state funding has gotten more competitive. So it's definitely changed the landscape in, what we chase, and now everyone else is trying to fill those gaps as well. So it's just getting very, very competitive out there. And especially with the SNAP benefit cuts, that's going to be a huge impact as more and more people are needing food banks. So the need is just going to grow.
So I think a couple questions sort of stemming back to things that you said. So for the grant funding that you're pulling in, that's like foundation funding, things like, and has any of that been state funding that might be passed through the federal government, or is it all really foundation funding is supporting the food bank?
Yeah, great question. That is, state funding is mostly been from the actual state budget. I have checked, but we actually this year we're doing things a little differently. We actually are looking to get TFAP funding as well. So we are going for those USDA pass-through funds from the state. So, it may be a little dicey at the moment, but we're still trying every avenue to get people fed. So,
Right. It's been difficult. So I also work for a healthcare provider that has a food bank attached to it,
oh,
and we're
nice.
a TFAP partner. And what we've noticed over the past several years is that the sort of inventory has gone down. There's less on offer. It was harder to get things like pasta, peanut butter, sort of the staple things that we like to be sure that we're providing to folks.
Yeah,
So, but some of the sort of, I want to use the word scavenge, I think is the word, what they call it, where, they have these like big boxes, it's donated food, and it's, sometimes sort of off the wall things that you're sort of like, oh, I don't even know I've never even seen this in the grocery store, but here it is, and we'll offer it to see, how people feel about it. But we've noticed inventory has gone down, and then sort of funding around, that sort of is from the state passed through the federal government to support things like operational changes that we have to make, or like if we're moving our space or if we need a new refrigerator, we've had to fundraise for those things, which we've always found the community to be very supportive of increasing food security. So we feel very blessed for that, but it has been difficult. And we were out at our TFAP program at Food Share, which is what handles Connecticut's food distribution. And it was just there. The warehouse
yeah.
was it was very difficult to see. And at the same time, we have more people coming in.
Yeah, we're really lucky with our location here because Sumner, it's a small farm town, but it also half of it's been given over to warehouses basically because we're near some good roads. So we
Right.
have all these different logistics programs, different warehouses calling us throughout the day saying, "Hey, we have 18 pallets of broccoli that we need to get gone so we can move on. Can you take it?" And we have a policy of never saying no, which is good and bad in many ways. But we've said yes to garden gnomes before, is all I'm gonna say. Um, I don't. Anyway, so we take the broccoli and we send it out to that partnership program that I mentioned, and it gets out into the rural areas. It gets out into the food deserts in the area, which are places that have less access to healthy grocery and might just have fast food in the area. So we try to send food out into those areas especially. But yeah, just working with as a intermediary between the trucking companies who need someone to just pass stuff off to and then handing it over to all these smaller operations has been really, really great way to keep us in food and also make sure food is available for everyone.
That's an amazing way to manage it. Do you know about how many lives you end up touching that way on average?
Yeah, I think the last partner survey we did, it was about 62,000 across the whole region of food banks and such. So it's a lot of people.
Yeah, it is a lot of people. That's absolutely amazing. I feel like one of the questions I have here is how do you balance crisis response with long-term development strategy? And it sounds like you had that really sort of wrapped up, right?
Yeah,
So
that
you
would be
had
part of it.
Yeah, right? It really is that fund development strategy that so difficult to sort of get into place for small nonprofit organizations that have not done any kind of fundraising
Hmm.
in the past, but it really is sort of having that plan that's a combination of different funding. So you're really braiding your funding sources and not relying on just one thing. Um, and I know that there are a lot of nonprofits, I think, at the moment that are feeling a little nervous at the sort of turning of the
Yeah,
tide in terms of, where programmatic support is coming from. If it's not coming from federal tax dollars, it comes from private foundations and things become more competitive.
yeah.
Sort of like to that end, have you like is the food bank considering at all expanding the number of foundations that you're reaching out to, or sort of having, your program partners do fundraising? Do they end up doing some of their own fundraising to support their operations, or are you all tied together?
Yeah, that's a great question. So all of them. We're definitely looking for, it's the word of the year, I feel like, diversifying our fundraising. We're very interested in looking at, I've been doing a lot of grants over the few years. So we're actually diversifying into more major gifts, more corporate sponsorship, more, I think I was talking to volunteers about designing some merchandise. So we're getting creative. And that's really kind of what I think is needed in this time, right? So all these different logistics companies, warehouses need to get rid of food. So that's their problem. And we can solve that problem and then creatively help others and the smaller food banks and make sure that they have what they need. So, I mean, this whole network was created by our operations manager and some of our team, and they just, you know, are going after it and trying to be creative and say, hey, we can help you, you can help us, we'll make something work and we'll just get everyone fed. And that's, I mean, everyone, it's a nonpartisan issue. So it's a great way to kind of get people together and start reaching out to different people in the community. I love it.
Yeah. It's really wonderful. So just for my sort of clarify, there are programs through the federal government that were helping farmers to get their food out to food banks. Is that part of what, when you talk about the pallets of broccoli, for instance, is that part of that program, or is this separate from any kind of federal run program at
This is
all?
separate. Yeah, a lot of the time, certain companies or stores will say, you know what, they reject a whole truckload because a box is broken or something is misaligned or something like that. So the truckers need to get on the road. So they don't care what happens. And in the past, they've had to go to a landfill, unload the entire truck by hand into the landfill, and then it would take them all day. So what we do and what some other food banks do, you know, have the truckers call us and they know to call us. The logistics people know to call us. So they say, hey, can you take all this food? And we're like, yes, just bring it here. We'll offload it. We have, you know, all the equipment. So they're in and out in 20 minutes. They're on the road, moving on. The food is not in a landfill and the food is perfectly fine. It's just going to somewhere where it's needed now. So yeah,
Curiosity, how many people does it take to do such a thing in 20 minutes? That's
it's okay. Well,
wild.
20 minutes depending on the load. But yeah, we have a full warehouse crew. We have, you know, I want to say 3 or 4 paid staff in the warehouse alone. Then we have a bunch of volunteers, which are incredible. We couldn't do it without them, of course. So it is a lot of work, though. And we have people coming. I think we get a couple of those calls a week at minimum. So it's always something going on. And we never know what it's going to be either. So we have a wide variety of very strange foods at all times.
So, do you have a method for sort of getting the word out that you do this? You know, maybe there's a grocery store or another vendor, for lack of a better word, that would have, you know, bread, and you're not doing bread right now. Do you have a method for communicating the needs to the community that's sort of specific and part of your fund development plan?
Yeah. So the our warehouse program has been built up over the years. So they've been talking to, it's very much word of mouth for all the truckers and the warehouses and the logistics programs. So they know at this point to contact us. I think our operations manager even left our number and our card at like a gas station they frequent or something. So he's just getting to where they are and making sure they know that this is an option. And then, you know, for food, we actually had the WSDA We Feed Washington grant for the last 2 years, which has been really, really wonderful. Sadly, it's not continuing, but it allowed us to purchase, you were mentioning farmers earlier, it allowed us to purchase food directly from Washington state farmers and food producers and just get some staple foods like milk, fresh produce, eggs, stuff like that. So that has been really great. So we're actually continuing that with different funding. Um, so we have those important culturally relevant or just nutritious foods for people. And then we have a wonderful, like I said, we have a wonderful community. They do a lot of food drives, even throughout the year. And if we're short on something, we actually just ask on Facebook. So we like just asking people. And a lot of the time, people say, hey, we just saw that you needed a bunch of peanut butter, and they'll deliver it. It's wonderful.
Right. It's interesting, I think, that there's a difference sometimes between asking for, you know, what's considered the in-kind support,
Hmm.
like the actual food, versus asking for cash donations. Sometimes that's difficult, especially for people who are new to any kind of philanthropy, to sort of reach their hand out with the explanation that's, you know, this is to support the work of the organization. We run into that a fair amount, that
Yeah.
it's just awkward for
Yeah.
people.
And
So do you
go ahead.
No, no, please go
Well, I
ahead.
was gonna just kind of continue on that because we've found that as well. And like I said, food is one thing. We get a lot of donated food, but for fundraising and just generally, we have to pay all those people who are working, getting the food out of the truck in 20 minutes. So one thing we found is in-kind donation is absolutely the way to go. Like if a company or business doesn't want to donate money, they might donate, an item for an auction or something like that. So, or a package or a basket or something like that. So there's it's really just about getting creative and just kind of talking to people and having the conversation like, hey, you can't do this. Would you be interested in doing this instead? Or, having them volunteer or have them do a food drive or a, you know, fundraiser of their own. So people are very willing to help in some way. It's just kind of figuring out what they can or cannot do.
I often find sort of internally with colleagues who are reticent to ask for support that having the conversation with them a couple times about, this is why we do it. It's not for ourselves. You're not asking for the money to do something for yourself. You're not going to go try to buy a new purse with it, right? Or buy a new vehicle with it. You're asking on behalf of somebody who really is in need and, requires the support. So think about it from that person. It's like the asking for a friend,
Yeah, exactly. Having those
right?
stories up, I mean, fundraising is basically storytelling, right? So having those stories about this is the client that we help, this is the volunteer who, changed their life because they were serving with us. This is, the family that had an empty fridge or something like that. So having these stories ready and people willing to tell them and just letting people know the human side of whatever you're doing. If it's not a food bank, I mean, there's tons of stories. People love, children and puppies. It's kind of
They do.
the basis. So just being able to show the need in a human way is a huge help.
Yeah, and it's always really good when and I think actually this feels good on both sides when you're able, as the person who's doing the fundraising, to follow up with the person who gave the money in order to support the cause, tell them this is what happened. So we actually last year during Thanksgiving, our Thanksgiving drive typically feeds about 121 families, and we usually only end up buying about 25. That's a very specific number. Typically one
Yeah, right.
about 120 families, and we found that usually we have to purchase about 25 meals, but the rest of it is donated and through food. But this past year, we found our allocation was 13 turkeys, and we had about 105 families signed up to feed, somewhere around that. And so the only way that we were able to provide the meals to our families was through the fundraising we'd done through a 5K event. And it was really wonderful to be able to thank our donor, who was one of our biggest sponsors at our annual reception, and say, you're really the reason that almost 100 people had a Thanksgiving meal this year.
Yeah.
And we just, you know, we want them to feel so good about what they're doing because it's so important to, that is what community is, right? Is reaching out and saying, I want to help you because I have a lot to give. So I always think it's important, like, all the way around, right? As the fundraiser, as the person giving the money, and as the person trying to get your colleagues to help you get people to give you the donations you need to support your community.
Yeah.
But so, sorry, go
No,
ahead.
I was just going to totally agree with you. Absolutely. I can't remember I have Googled so many different fundraising tips and experts and such. And one of my favorites, I'll never remember who it is, but it's just a basic, you ask and then you thank immediately and then you report back and just say, here's what you've done, here's the people you've helped, this is the child, the face of the child that is smiling now because of you, right? So that donor engagement, that follow-up is incredibly important because otherwise people are like, well, it just went into a black hole and I don't know if I did any good, maybe I'll try somewhere else. So yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely more difficult when you are trying to sort of keep the lights on, and I think there's concerns right now with the sort of uh, financial atmosphere, for lack of a better way of saying it, in the country, that a lot of nonprofits are going to be looking at just keeping the lights on and having to ask for money for that specific reason, for that sort of unrestricted donation, right? Do you have any thoughts on, how to help people make that
Yeah.
request? Or
It
yeah.
I think it's all in the framing, of course. You know, I talk about showing the human side of who you're helping, but that doesn't end just because you're asking for salary or asking for operations or something like that. You can't help those children or those families without keeping the lights on, like you said. So I think, donors are smart enough to understand that. They're like, yes, you need to be in existence in order to help people. That's important. And yeah, it's just about framing it in a way like, we want to help these people. Can you help us do so? And making sure that the donor is the hero. Like, you are stepping into the gap. You are making sure that these people get fed by making sure that we're able to do the work we need to do. Just framing it around what the donor is doing and how it may not directly like put food on the table for someone, but it is making sure that happens. So just, yeah.
I mean, in particular with an operation like yours, where the administrative piece is a really heavy lift, right? And that what you're doing for people won't happen without that administrative piece, that sort of indirect cost, if you will,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
So, um, so do you have any strategies or tools that you've used to sort of help build capacity for your fundraising?
Yes, I have so many tools. Like I said, I started in 2021. I knew a little bit of grant writing. I knew a lot of marketing. I didn't know anything about fundraising. So I've been Googling like crazy for the last few years. Um, so there's a lot. So grant writing is kind of my focus. So I really enjoy learning more about that and kind of being able to find grants. The research is a big part of that. So I really like Meredith Noble. She does the Grant Writing Collective, a lot of wonderful information from her. Um, I would go immediately to Instrumental and get a free trial. They have like 2 to 3 weeks of a free trial. It's an incredible program for finding grants, being able to track them. We have like a partnership with some other grant writers, so I actually don't I just have like a seat on their account, so it's wonderful. It is a little bit more expensive, but it is totally worth it if you're able to pay for it. For fundraising, there's a lot of different people. You can definitely just Google, how to do corporate sponsorship, and someone will pop up, and there's usually 2 to 3 experts. My favorite for fundraising in general is it's called Tactical Thursdays from the
Thursday.
Nonprofit Storytelling Conference, pardon me. And it is every type of fundraising. They do webinars once a week, just going through a deep dive of a very specific issue or a need or like how to do this. And it just gives you so much information. They have tons of guests that know everything. It's great. So I definitely look into them. But yeah, it's really at this point just kind of Googling and seeing who's out there and talking about certain things. And there's experts in every type of fundraising. So diversifying is actually getting easier in that you can just find information on what you need to know, and then you're gonna have to learn it and do it. But the information is definitely out there.
Yeah. I always find that sometimes the sort of daunting piece of developing a fund development program is where to start. Where do we even start with it? And I like to tell people that they should start with two things. And it's sort of assessing what your staff can do, like who has what abilities, like what do you already think people have in terms of skills? Is somebody a grant writer? Is somebody a great chatter who can go out to events and like meet people and they're super comfortable with that? Do you have people who are great at organizing events? Because those things, as simple as they seem, there's so many moving parts, right? Even a 5K, which is really a very easy event to put together, has a lot of pieces. And you need the volunteer coordination alone can be really
Yeah,
daunting.
delegation is absolutely your friend. Speaking as the only fundraiser on the team, I could not do it without everyone. We just had our golf tournament for the year, which is a lot of fun, and it went really, really well because we had this volunteer coordinator and her entire group who were in charge of auctions and food and golfers and all sorts of stuff. So they know what they're doing, and you can always find a group of people to kind of help out if you appreciate them and you make sure that they're part of the team and you're not just using them as free labor. So yeah,
Right, right. That
they have to be
recognition
part of the
piece is
team.
really
Yeah.
exactly. That's exactly right. So important. The other thing I usually say is you have to figure out, what are you raising money for?
Hmm.
What are you even doing with
Yeah.
it? What do you
Yeah.
need? Because without those two sort of things, like where are you at right now and what is it that you think you're going to need? It's hard to start a fund development
Yeah.
program
Yeah. The
at
prep
all.
work is super important. I just talked to a smaller food bank person yesterday, actually, and she's like, we need a truck. We need a box truck to give food. And I'm like, great. Do you know which one? Do you know how much it's going to be? Do you know who you need to talk to? Like, it's great to have the wish list, but you need to like flesh it out and be able to, she was looking for grants. So I told her you have to have this, this, and this to get grant ready. So they will actually fund you. Having all that prep work done for fundraising, for grant writing is incredibly important.
Right, right. And then I always think too that having the person who says, okay, that's great. Now we have it. How are you
Yes,
maintaining it?
exactly.
Right. Oh, this is great. You have a U-Haul truck that you're getting with 5 grand, and wow, that's a great amount of money, but who's fixing it if it breaks down, and how are you paying for
Yeah.
that?
How much
Right.
is insurance? How are you doing that?
Good to know. So I think that like that's the sort of value of your grants people, right? Because they really have to sort of talk about sustainability as they're writing that grant, and helps the staff to really think about that
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So looking forward, or actually, sorry, let me back up. Um, do you have sort of strategies that you use to engage staff, board members, and the community in the fundraising work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I definitely have been collecting stories, first of all, and I'm actually using those to talk to volunteers, to talk to our board members, especially, and say, hey, these are people that we've helped and that we can tell the story of. I just need someone to tell the story and talk to potential donors, talk to companies in the area. So I'm doing the prep work for them, which I mentioned, and making sure that they are fully equipped for whatever they need. So I'm actually writing up board training right now for different fundraising, and I'm giving them options as, okay, maybe you don't want to go talk to a donor or ask money because that's scary. Could you, invite a couple of your friends over for a tour, or could you invite them to this event, or could you share this on Facebook, or, just giving them options, because there's so many things that need to be done. They can choose something, and some of them are going to be more direct than others, but making sure that they feel comfortable with doing something and making sure that they're contributing in a way that furthers the goal without making them leave the board or something like that. So that's a big part for the board. For our staff, we definitely do the delegation to volunteers and staff as needed, and we get a lot of information from the staff for the program to kind of speak to what the need is, and who we're helping, especially fundraising. Just saying, hey, please help us feed people. It works, but it doesn't work as well. By giving us $25, you're feeding 5 families. If you give us $50, you're feeding this many families. So being able to have those numbers directly from our program and our staff really helps engage them, while also giving us information that we can definitely use to tell a better story. And it comes down to story, like I said. So engaging them in that way, and then we get to engage the community using those numbers, using those stories, and just really show the need. And the community can step up, because it is about stepping up with what you have in the time that is needed. You just need to tell people what is needed.
I agree. I agree. So what are you planning for the next 1 to 2 years in terms of development for the food bank?
Yeah, well, even in this crazy, crazy time, the need is growing. So we're actually looking at expanding our capacity, with a new building or something like that. So we're in the very much the planning stages right now. But we're fundraising wise, we're looking at growing our major gifts and our corporate sponsorship, kind of building the structure of them and doing that prep work that I mentioned. So when we have to go talk to people and have to start doing face to face, we have something ready. We have the structure, so it's not overwhelming. Like you said, it's learning where to start and building something up that is manageable with what time you have and what resources you have. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Do you think there are trends or opportunities in philanthropy or community giving that you're feeling especially hopeful about in this 2025?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's definitely scary out there, but I think studies have definitely shown that less donors are coming in, but they're giving more. So, really leaning into those corporate sponsorships, those major gifts, those about 20% of your donors are going to give 80% of what you get. So, really trying to focus in on those and do a really good job with engaging them and telling the story and making sure that they're on board and building relationships. It's always about relationships. And I think that in-kind donations, like we mentioned, is a really great way to get creative with things. That people may not be interested in giving you money, but they may be interested in giving you an item, or that you can, use or give to your clients, or even just use for an auction or something like that. So there's a lot of great ways to get very, very creative that I feel are going. And on a personal level, if you're a fundraiser and stressed about this all, I think it's a really good time for professional development. AI is a little bit controversial, and I have multiple opinions about it, but it's something that is helpful for you in a lot of ways, just to learn about and make sure that you at least know what's going on with it, and if it is useful and how you're going to use it. And like I said, I'm learning how to do a bunch of different fundraising models. So this is a great time for people to get creative and learn how to do fundraising they may have not looked at before, or have, kind of freaked them out before. So yeah, we're all getting very versatile and switching to.
It's interesting. We found very much the same thing, that sort of our steady donors, their donations are
Mm-hmm.
larger as we don't even seem to need to tell them that the need has increased. They seem to sense it on their own. But so I was going to ask you what a truly resilient funding model would look like for the Sumner Food Bank, but it sounds like it's sort of this creativity, diversity model that I think everybody really is going to have to
Yeah.
adopt.
Yeah, I've
Right.
definitely seen that a lot of information on fundraising. Like I said, I've been learning as much as I can. I think a truly diverse and resilient model would be, 20% funding from different sources at the max. You don't want to depend on one type of funding, because we're seeing what that it does. So you really want to have, grants, major donors, recurrent donors, who are giving to you every month, individual, every type that you can possibly get. Just make sure it's coming from a lot of different sources. And you want to have lots and lots of partnerships. And you mentioned, I think, that you had a lack of turkeys one year. And you just know in the community somewhere out there, there is a store who may have a few extra, or may be willing to just give them. Or, maybe someone's doing a program in your area for dental that is, great. And hey, our clients really need dental. So you talk to them and you bring them on board, just to come and visit or something like that. So the need is more than what you can cover. So you need to be able to reach out to other people doing different work or similar work, and kind of see what you can do together. And on the fundraising side, a grantor loves to see a partnership. So if you can get something together and say, hey, we need money to do this program together with this other group, it's such a great way to get the funders' attention.
Right. That sort of regional partnership. Yeah. I agree that that's really important. And I have to say that one of the things after the turkey gate for us in 2024 is that
Mm-hmm.
postmortem on your funding year is really important. Sort of looking back and examining what worked and what didn't work, and trying to consider why. In particular, with grants with smaller funders, if you're new to a foundation, for instance, and you missed things like if they're hosting something online about how to apply for their grants, or they had some sort of like online open house that you didn't attend, put your application in that first year, but then sort of be aware that the likelihood is kind of slimmer because they don't know you yet necessarily. But making sure that you don't give up, and you do that postmortem, and you look at how things went and make
Yes,
adjustments,
exactly.
and make sure you're at it
Yeah,
the
and
next time.
ask for feedback. Like, they may not give it to you depending on the grantor, but it is important just to say, hey, thank you, and be gracious about it. Say, I understand you guys are doing great work with other people. Maybe next time we can do that as well. So, yeah.
Right. And to just absolutely don't be
No,
demoralized when it doesn't work out, because it's a fairly large percentage of the time that it doesn't work out, and
I've
that's
gotten so
okay.
good at rejection. It's so, like, it's probably
Right.
very healthy for me, but it's terrible at times.
If only it had been like that back in high
Gosh,
school,
yeah.
right? But I think it's really important, because if you get demoralized, you start to think, oh, I don't want to try as hard, or I think it can change your demeanor even when you're asking for gifts or support. And so I think that's really important to stay positive about it. Your cause can't be everybody's cause, even though you think it should
Yeah,
be.
exactly.
And I agree.
Yeah. And I mean, you don't have to just send out grants into the ether. Like, you can research and you can talk to them beforehand, say, hey, get them on the phone, say, hey, is this interesting to you? Is this, like, do we have a shot at least? Like, how many people do you generally help? Like, get a percentage of that. You don't have to just guess and then be rejected from 99%. You can get it up to 30% wins or something like that. Like there's a lot of ways that you can just stack the deck in your favor. You still may not win with the perfect application, but you want to get as close to perfect as you can and make sure that, you know, even if you don't win that one, you apply for 10 more or 20 more or whatever it takes. Like just make it a numbers game at the end.
I think that's great advice, though, to just pick up that phone. If you're looking at a foundation and they have grant managers, call that grant manager who's in
Immediately.
charge of the funding stream you reply to, yeah. And just have the conversation. So when your application rolls in, they're like, I know Katie
Yeah.
Garling. We had a talk about this. So they're expecting it and they know you a
Yeah.
little
And it
bit.
may or may not help, but at the very least, you'll have some conversation saying, oh, no, we're not funding on that this year. And then you're like, great, don't have to spend any time on that something that is not going to work anyway. And you can move on.
Right. That's great advice. So do you have any final reflections or advice for fundraisers or nonprofit leaders?
Oh, it's scary right now, but don't give up. Like we were just saying, there are things you can be doing. There are ways that you can get creative with it, whether it's through in-kind donations, whether it's through trying new things, whether it's through, building up your skills so you can kind of do more. Definitely delegating and leaning on volunteers. They know it's a difficult time too if they've been part of any part of your program. And definitely talk to other organizations because it's scary, but I feel like if we can't deal with something on a federal level, we can definitely start on a local level and try to fill any needs there.
Yeah, that's terrific advice. So, where can listeners learn more about the Sumner Community Food Bank or connect
Yeah,
with you?
absolutely. So we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on LinkedIn. Speaking of delegation, I just got a marketing assistant who does all that. So I'm in love with that. Yeah, so just search for the Sumner Community Food Bank. We also have a monthly newsletter where we share our stories and kind of give resources for our area.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I think that this is an important topic for the coming years, and I hope that we have the chance to interact with you more in the future.
Definitely.